The rise of Caitlin Clark doesn't just feel like the emergence of another great athlete, it feels like the beginning of a shift that had been quietly building beneath the surface of the sport for years, waiting for the right moment and the right player to bring it all into the light. For a long time, women's basketball had stars, it had legends, it had moments of brilliance that deserved attention, but it lacked that one singular force capable of pulling everything together into a mainstream phenomenon. And then, suddenly, almost without warning, Caitlin Clark stepped into that space, and everything changed. The arenas grew louder, the broadcasts reached further, the conversations expanded beyond the usual circles, and people who had never paid attention before found themselves watching, reacting, and coming back for more. It wasn't just about her ability to score or her deep range that stretched beyond what seemed reasonable. It was about the way she made the game feel, the way every possession carried tension, the way every shot felt like it could turn into something unforgettable. For years, comparisons followed her everywhere, and one name in particular kept resurfacing: Stephen Curry. At first, it sounded like a bold claim, maybe even an exaggeration driven by hype, but the more she played, the more it started to make sense. It wasn't just about shooting from the logo or hitting impossible threes under pressure. It was about the gravity she created on the court. Defenses bent around her, attention shifted toward her at all times, and even when she didn't have the ball, she was still controlling the game. That kind of presence is rare, and when it appears, it doesn't just elevate a player, it transforms the entire experience of watching basketball. But long before the spotlight found her, before the comparisons and the headlines and the record-breaking performances, there was a much simpler version of this story unfolding in Iowa. A young girl, not thinking about fame or legacy, not concerned with how many people were watching, but completely consumed by one thing: the need to compete. It wasn't something she learned from a coach or developed over time. It was something that existed within her from the very beginning. Even at an age where most kids are still figuring out what they enjoy, Caitlin Clark already knew how much winning mattered to her, even if she couldn't fully explain why. Losing didn't just feel like a normal part of the game. It felt wrong, confusing, almost unacceptable in a way that drove her to react emotionally, to question what had gone wrong, to push harder the next time. That kind of mindset can be difficult to manage, especially at such a young age. There were moments when that intensity overflowed, when frustration turned into tears, when the emotional weight of competition became too much to contain. But those moments weren't signs of weakness, they were early indicators of something much deeper. They revealed a level of investment that most people never reach, a level of care that goes beyond simply playing for fun. For Caitlin, competition wasn't just an activity, it was a reflection of who she was, and because of that, every outcome mattered. As she grew, that competitive fire needed an outlet, and sports became the perfect environment for it to take shape. She didn't limit herself to one path early on, instead diving into multiple sports with the same level of intensity. Volleyball, soccer, softball, golf, basketball, each one offered a new challenge, a new opportunity to test herself. And in each of them, she didn't just participate, she excelled. She quickly separated herself from her peers, often playing at a level that made it difficult for others to keep up. Coaches noticed, teammates noticed, and her parents began to understand that this wasn't just a phase or a hobby, this was something more. But success came with an unexpected complication. In sports like soccer and softball, where she was clearly ahead of the competition, the lack of challenge started to become a problem. For someone driven by the need to compete at the highest level, being the best wasn't enough if there was no resistance. It created a sense of boredom, of feeling that something was missing. What should have been the perfect environment for growth instead became limiting, and slowly those sports began to fade into the background. Basketball, however, was different. From the moment she truly connected with it, there was a sense that this was where everything fit together. The pace of the game, the constant movement, the need to think and react in real time, it all aligned with the way she approached competition. It wasn't just about physical ability, it was about creativity, decision-making, and the ability to control the flow of the game. It gave her the freedom to express her instincts while constantly challenging her to improve. And once that connection was made, there was no turning back. Her development took an unconventional route almost immediately. At an age where most players are just beginning to understand the basics, Caitlin was already stepping into boys' leagues, not because it was part of a grand plan, but because there simply wasn't another option that matched her level. For many, that would have been intimidating, a situation filled with physical mismatches and potential setbacks. But for her, it became an advantage. It forced her to adapt quickly, to develop skills that went beyond strength or speed. She had to think faster, move smarter, and find ways to create opportunities against opponents who had natural physical advantages. That experience shaped her in ways that would later define her style of play. It taught her that the game isn't always fair, that you don't always have the advantage, and that success often comes down to how well you can adjust to the situation in front of you. It also built a level of toughness that couldn't be taught in a controlled environment. Every game was a challenge, every possession required effort, and every moment demanded focus. Off the court, that same level of competition continued. Growing up with brothers who played sports meant that there was never a break from the intensity. Every game, every interaction carried a competitive edge, and if she wanted to keep up, she had to earn it. There were no shortcuts, no easy wins, just constant challenges that pushed her to improve. It wasn't always smooth. There were moments where frustration boiled over, where the desire to win led to clashes and conflicts, but those experiences played a crucial role in shaping her mentality. At the same time, inspiration began to take a more defined form. Watching Maya Moore wasn't just about admiration, it was about possibility. Seeing someone dominate at the highest level made the dream tangible, something real rather than abstract. Those long trips to watch games became part of her development, not just as a fan, but as a student of the game. She wasn't just watching for entertainment, she was observing, learning, imagining what it would be like to be in that position one day. And as the years passed, that vision became clearer. The skills improved, the understanding of the game deepened, and the performances began to reflect the work she had put in. By the time she reached high school, it was no longer a question of potential. It was a matter of how far she could go. From the very beginning, she stood out, not just because of her scoring ability, but because of the way she controlled the game. She played with a confidence that made it seem like she had already been at that level for years, like the pressure and expectations that usually come with high school competition simply didn't apply to her. And instead of slowing down, she accelerated. Each season brought new achievements, new records, new moments that pushed her further into the spotlight. The numbers told part of the story, but they didn't capture the full picture. It was the way she played, the creativity, the fearlessness, the willingness to take shots that others wouldn't even consider that truly set her apart. She wasn't just following the game as it existed, she was expanding it. Then came the performance that changed everything. 60 points in a single game, a number that doesn't just stand out, it demands attention. But it wasn't just about the points, it was about the way she scored them, the range, the rhythm, the control. It all came together in a way that felt almost unreal. It wasn't just a great game, it was a statement, a moment that signaled to everyone watching that something special was happening. From that point on, the attention only grew. National recognition followed, opportunities expanded, and the path forward became clearer. But even with all the attention, all the expectations, she remained focused on the same thing that had driven her from the beginning: competing, improving, finding ways to win. And as her high school career came to an end, the question wasn't whether she would succeed at the next level, it was how far she would take it. The stage was set, the foundation was built, and the next chapter was ready to begin. The transition from high school dominance to the collegiate stage is where many great players are tested, where raw talent meets structure, pressure intensifies, and expectations begin to carry real weight.
For Caitlin Clark, this wasn't just another step in her journey. It was the moment where everything she had built in the shadows would be exposed to a much larger stage. The decision to stay in Iowa and represent her home state wasn't simply a comfortable choice, it was a statement. It reflected a belief, not just in herself, but in what she could build there, in the idea that she could elevate a program and leave a legacy that went beyond individual success. From the moment she stepped on the court for her debut, it became clear that she wasn't there to adjust slowly or find her rhythm over time. She arrived with it. There was no hesitation, no visible nerves, just the same confidence and aggression that had defined her game from the very beginning. Her first performances weren't just solid for a freshman, they were commanding.
She played like someone who already understood the pace, already knew how to control it, already knew how to impose herself on the game regardless of the level of competition. And almost immediately, the numbers began to reflect that presence. But what truly separated her wasn't just the scoring. It was the complete control she seemed to have over every aspect of the game. She wasn't just putting points on the board, she was creating opportunities, manipulating defenses, dictating tempo in a way that made her feel like the center of everything happening on the court. Every possession seemed to run through her, every decision carried her imprint, and even when she wasn't scoring, she was shaping the outcome of the game in ways that didn't always show up on the stat sheet. As her freshman season unfolded, the consistency of her performances began to turn heads across the country. Game after game, she delivered at a level that felt unsustainable for most players, yet for her, it became the standard. Defenses started adjusting, focusing more attention on her, trying to limit her impact. But those adjustments often created new opportunities. Double teams opened passing lanes, pressure created space, and she adapted in real time, finding ways to stay effective no matter how opponents tried to contain her. There was a growing sense that this wasn't just a promising start, this was the beginning of something much bigger. By the end of her first season, she had already established herself as one of the most dangerous players in college basketball. Leading the nation in scoring as a freshman wasn't just impressive, it was a statement about the kind of player she was becoming. It showed that her game translated, that her style worked, that the confidence she carried wasn't misplaced. But success at that level brings new challenges. Expectations shift. What was once surprising becomes expected. And for many players, that shift can create pressure that changes how they approach the game. For Caitlin, it had the opposite effect. Instead of pulling back, she pushed forward. Instead of playing it safe, she expanded her game even further. Her second season felt like an evolution rather than a continuation. The scoring remained elite, but there was a noticeable growth in her overall control of the game. She wasn't just reacting anymore, she was anticipating, reading defenses before they fully formed, making decisions a step ahead of everyone else on the court. It created a sense that she was operating at a different speed, not physically, but mentally. And that difference showed up in moments where the game slowed down for her, while everyone else seemed to be scrambling to keep up. As Iowa began to find success as a team, her role within that success became even more pronounced. She wasn't just the leading scorer, she was the engine driving everything forward. Big games, high-pressure moments, situations where the outcome hung in the balance, those were the moments where she seemed most comfortable. The stage didn't intimidate her, it amplified her. One of the defining aspects of her game during this period was her willingness to take shots that others wouldn't even consider, pulling up from distances that stretched the defense beyond its limits, taking high-difficulty attempts in crucial moments, playing with a level of confidence that bordered on audacity. But what made it work wasn't just the boldness, it was the execution. Those shots went in, and when they didn't just add points to the scoreboard, they shifted momentum, they energized teammates, they forced opponents to rethink everything.
The comparisons to Stephen Curry grew louder during this time, and they started to feel less like a narrative and more like an accurate reflection of her impact. Just like Curry, she wasn't just scoring, she was changing the geometry of the game. Defenders had to extend further, react quicker, cover more ground, and that created ripple effects across every possession. It opened up the floor in ways that traditional playstyles couldn't replicate. But as her individual brilliance continued to rise, the ultimate goal remained just out of reach. The NCAA tournament, the stage where legacies are defined, presented challenges that even her incredible performances couldn't always overcome. There were moments of brilliance, games where she delivered unforgettable performances, but the deeper runs, the championship dreams, they remained unfinished. For many players, those setbacks can become defining moments in a negative sense. They can create doubt, hesitation, second-guessing. But for Caitlin, they became fuel. Each loss added another layer to her motivation, another reason to come back stronger, another reminder of what she was chasing. Her third season marked a turning point not just in her career, but in the perception of her team as a whole. Iowa wasn't just a competitive program anymore, it was a contender. And at the center of that transformation was Caitlin Clark, playing at a level that seemed almost impossible to sustain.
This was the season where everything came together. The scoring, the playmaking, the leadership, the ability to rise in the biggest moments. It wasn't just about putting up numbers anymore. It was about delivering when it mattered most. And time after time, she did exactly that. One of the most iconic stretches of her career came during this run, where she didn't just perform, she dominated on a historic level. Triple doubles in high-pressure games, massive scoring nights against top competition, performances that didn't just win games, but defined them. And as the tournament progressed, the attention around her grew exponentially. Then came the moment that would cement her place in history, a performance that transcended expectations, that redefined what was possible on that stage, leading her team deep into the tournament, breaking barriers that had stood for decades, delivering performances that felt almost unreal in their consistency and impact. The victory over a dominant opponent, ending a massive winning streak, wasn't just a win, it was a statement. It showed that she could not only compete with the best, but defeat them. It proved that her style of play, her approach, her confidence, it all translated to the highest level of competition. And when she stepped onto the biggest stage, the national championship game, the weight of the moment didn't seem to faze her. She played with the same intensity, the same belief, the same willingness to take control. The performance was strong, the effort undeniable, but the outcome didn't go her way. The championship slipped through her fingers, leaving her just short of the ultimate goal. But even in defeat, something had changed. The audience had grown, the attention had multiplied, the game itself felt different because of what she had done. It wasn't just about winning or losing anymore, it was about impact, and her impact was undeniable. As she entered her final season, there was a sense that this was her moment, the culmination of everything she had built, everything she had worked for, everything she had experienced, and once again, she delivered. Night after night, performance after performance, she continued to push the boundaries of what seemed possible. Then came the record, the moment where she became the all-time leading scorer, not just in women's basketball, but in NCAA history, a milestone that reflected years of dedication, consistency, and excellence. It wasn't just a number, it was a symbol of everything she had accomplished. And yet, even with that achievement, the hunger remained. The drive to win, to compete, to reach the ultimate goal, it never faded. The final tournament run carried that same intensity, that same belief that this time could be different. And once again, she led her team to the brink, delivering performances that captivated audiences and reinforced her status as one of the most exciting players the game had ever seen. But once again, the championship slipped away.
Another close ending, another reminder of how difficult it is to reach the very top. And yet, this time, it felt different, because by now, her legacy wasn't defined by a single game or a single outcome. It was defined by everything she had done along the way. She had changed the way people watched the game. She had brought new audiences, new energy, new attention to women's basketball. She had created moments that would be remembered long after her college career ended. And as she prepared to take the next step, there was no doubt that her impact would continue to grow. The question was no longer whether she could succeed at the next level. The question was how far she would take it. The moment Caitlin Clark made the decision to step away from college and declare for the professional stage, it didn't feel like a gamble. It felt like the inevitable next chapter of a story that had already outgrown its previous setting. By that point, she had done everything except capture the one prize that had narrowly escaped her. But even without that final piece, her influence had already stretched far beyond wins and losses. She had become the center of attention, the reason people tuned in, the reason arenas filled, the reason conversations about women's basketball suddenly reached audiences that had never been part of it before. And now, as she prepared to enter the WNBA, the anticipation wasn't just about how she would perform, it was about what her presence would do to the league itself. When the Indiana Fever selected her as the #1 overall pick, it didn't come as a surprise to anyone. It was the kind of decision that makes itself, the kind that defines a franchise's direction for years to come. But what followed was something few could have fully predicted. Almost immediately, the energy around the league shifted. Ticket sales surged, viewership numbers climbed, and games that might have once gone under the radar suddenly became must-watch events. It wasn't just about her fans following her to the next level. It was about curiosity turning into engagement, about people wanting to see if the player they had heard so much about could truly deliver against the best competition in the world.
And from the very beginning, it was clear that the transition would not be easy. The professional level brings a different kind of intensity, a different kind of physicality, a different kind of pressure. Every opponent is elite, every game demands focus, and every mistake is magnified. For someone who had dominated at every previous level, this was the first time in a long time where she would be consistently tested in ways that couldn't simply be overcome by talent alone. The early moments of her professional career were a mix of brilliance and challenge. There were flashes of the same player who had taken over college basketball, the deep shots, the creative passes, the fearless approach to big moments. But there were also adjustments that had to be made, lessons that had to be learned in real time. Defenders were stronger, faster, more experienced. They understood her tendencies, studied her movements, and came prepared to make every possession difficult. And unlike previous levels where she could often impose her will immediately, this environment required patience, adaptation, and growth. What made this phase of her journey so compelling wasn't just how she performed, but how she responded. There were moments where things didn't go her way, where shots didn't fall, where physical play disrupted her rhythm. There were critics who questioned whether her style would translate, whether the same aggressive, high-risk approach that made her so exciting in college would hold up against professional defenses. There were voices that suggested she would need to change, to adjust, to become something different in order to succeed. But if there was one thing that had defined her career up to that point, it was her refusal to back down from challenges. Instead of retreating, she leaned in. Instead of playing it safe, she continued to trust her instincts. And slowly, as the games passed, the adjustments began to show. The decision-making became sharper, the timing more precise, the understanding of the professional game more complete. At the same time, the attention surrounding her only continued to grow. Every game she played felt like an event. Every performance was analyzed, discussed, debated. The spotlight that had followed her through college now felt even brighter, even more intense. And with that spotlight came not just admiration, but scrutiny. Veterans in the league, analysts, former players, everyone had an opinion on her impact, her style, her place within the game. Some embraced what she brought, recognizing the way she was helping to elevate the league, to bring in new fans, to create opportunities that extended beyond the court. Others were more critical, pointing out the challenges she faced, emphasizing the differences between college and professional play, suggesting that reality would eventually set in. It created a narrative that followed her into every game, a constant conversation about whether she could live up to the expectations that had been placed on her. But through it all, one thing remained consistent. She kept playing, she kept competing, she kept finding moments to remind everyone why she had captured so much attention in the first place. A deep three that shifted momentum, a pass that seemed impossible until it wasn't, a sequence where everything came together and the game once again revolved around her presence. And as the season progressed, the impact she had on the league became impossible to ignore. Viewership numbers didn't just increase, they surged. Attendance didn't just improve, it exploded. Games had to be moved to larger venues to accommodate the demand. The conversations around women's basketball weren't just growing, they were evolving. It wasn't just about the sport anymore. It was about the experience, the excitement, the sense that something new was happening. Her selection to the All-Star stage as a rookie wasn't just a recognition of her performance, it was a reflection of her influence. Receiving an unprecedented number of fan votes showed that her connection with the audience extended far beyond traditional boundaries. It showed that she had become more than just a player. She had become a focal point for the sport's growth. But even with all of that success, the journey was far from complete. Because for all the attention, all the records, all the moments of brilliance, the ultimate goal remained the same as it had been always: winning, competing at the highest level, finding a way to reach the top in an environment where every step forward is earned. What makes her story so compelling at this stage isn't just what she has already accomplished, it's what still lies ahead. The potential for growth, the opportunity to refine her game even further, the chance to turn individual brilliance into team success at the professional level. These are the challenges that will define the next phase of her career. And perhaps the most fascinating part of it all is how her presence continues to reshape the conversation around the sport. Young players now grow up watching her, inspired by the way she plays, the confidence she carries, the freedom with which she approaches the game. Fans who once overlooked women's basketball now find themselves invested, following teams, learning players, becoming part of a growing community. This is how change happens, not all at once, not through a single moment, but through a series of performances, decisions, and impacts that gradually shift perception. And in that sense, Caitlin Clark's journey is more than just basketball. It's about influence, about evolution, about what happens when one player's approach to the game resonates far beyond the boundaries of the court. As the seasons continue, as the competition intensifies, as the expectations rise even higher, the story will keep unfolding. There will be new challenges, new moments of doubt, new opportunities to prove herself once again. And if her past is any indication, she will meet those moments the same way she always has, with confidence, with intensity, with an unwavering belief in her ability to compete at the highest level. Because that's what has always defined her, not just the shots, not just the numbers, not just the highlights, but the mindset, the refusal to accept limits, the willingness to take risks, the drive to push beyond what others expect. And as long as that remains, the story will continue to grow, to evolve, to capture attention in ways that few athletes ever manage to achieve. So now the question shifts from what she has done to what she will do next. Will she lead her team to championships at the professional level? Will she continue to break records and redefine expectations? Will her influence keep expanding, bringing even more attention and respect to the game? Or will the challenges of the highest level push her to evolve into something even greater than what we've already seen? If you've followed this journey from the beginning, if you've watched the rise, the moments, the performances that made you stop and pay attention, then you already know that this is far from over. This isn't the end of the story, it's just the point where everything becomes even more interesting. So what do you think happens next for Caitlin Clark? Can she turn her incredible impact into championships and long-term dominance in the WNBA? Or is her greatest legacy already the way she transformed the game itself? Drop your thoughts below and be part of the conversation. And if you enjoyed this full cinematic breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next chapter of stories like this is just getting started.